The emergency medical center on Thalkren Station had seen its share of trauma cases. Dr. Vaylor had treated everything from industrial accidents to combat injuries during her 30 years of practice. The Thalkren facility serviced dozens of species from across the sector, and she prided herself on never being surprised by what walked or was carried through the doors. Until tonight. The emergency alert chimed at 2:47 station time. Vaylor, a Zorathi physician whose orange skin bore the silver markings of a master healer, glanced at the display. Incoming patient, human male, multiple injuries, ambulatory. Ambulatory? Her assistant, a young Velkari named Kursath, checked the readout again. That can't be right. The preliminary scan shows... He stopped, his bioluminescent patterns flickering with confusion. Doctor, this has to be a scanner malfunction. Vaylor moved to look at the medical scanner data being transmitted from the emergency transport. Her breath caught. The readings showed multiple skeletal fractures, severe soft tissue damage, probable internal bleeding, and a concussion. By any standard medical assessment, the patient should be unconscious at minimum, more likely in shock or cardiac arrest. Yet the notation clearly stated, patient ambulatory, refusing stretcher assistance. Prep Trauma Bay 3, Vaylor ordered, her professional instincts overriding her confusion. Full orthopedic and internal medicine protocols, and get Dr. Thalvin down here. If these readings are accurate, we're going to need a specialist. The emergency bay doors opened 3 minutes later. What walked through them made every medical professional in the ER stop and stare. The human was male, appearing to be in his mid-30s by the species standards. He was covered in blood, some dried, some fresh, and his clothing was torn and scorched. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle. His gait was uneven, clearly favoring his right leg. There was a visible contusion on the side of his head, and his breathing was labored, but he was walking under his own power, without assistance. "Hi," he said, his voice strained but conversational. "Sorry to bother you this late. I think I might need a doctor." The ER went absolutely silent. Vaylor recovered first, her medical training overriding her shock. "Sir, please don't move any further. We're bringing a—" "I got it," the human interrupted, walking toward the nearest examination bed. "Which one?" "Trauma Bay 3, Kursath managed, his voice faint. "But sir, you shouldn't be." The human changed direction, still walking, though Vaylor could now see the tremor in his legs, the way his jaw was clenched against obvious pain. He made it to the trauma bay and with visible effort sat down on the edge of the examination bed. "Okay," he said, his face pale beneath the blood and bruising. "I'm sat. Now what?" Vaylor approached cautiously, the way she might approach an unexploded explosive. She activated the room's medical scanner, and the holographic display populated with data that made her secondary heart skip a beat. Fractures, left radius and ulna, complete fractures. 3 ribs on the right side, 2 complete. 1 hairline, right fibula, spiral fracture. Left clavicle, displaced fracture, right hand. 2 metacarpals, 1 thumb phalanx compression fractures. L3 and L4 vertebrae bilateral fractures. Both orbital bones incomplete, left temporal bone, hairline fracture, sternum, incomplete fracture, right scapula, chip fracture, total. 17 distinct fractures. Plus severe contusions, a grade 2 concussion, and what appeared to be internal bleeding in the abdominal cavity. "How?" Vaylor couldn't even formulate the question. "How are you conscious?" The human, The scanner identified him as one James Parker, age 34, registered crew member of the cargo hauler Distant Star, gave her a weak smile. Adrenaline's a hell of a drug. Also, I needed to make sure my crew got out first. Couldn't exactly pass out until they were safe. Your crew. Vaylor was already calling for her full trauma team, her hands moving through diagnostic protocols on autopilot while her mind tried to process what she was seeing. Ship accident, Parker explained, his breathing growing more labored. Cargo bay explosion, took out structural supports. I got most of my people to the escape pods, but I had to go back for Chen. She was trapped under debris by the time I got her out and into the last pod. He gestured vaguely at himself. This happened. You went back, Vaylor repeated slowly, into a structurally compromised ship with these injuries to rescue another crew member. Well, yeah. Parker looked confused, as if she'd asked why he breathed oxygen. She's my engineer. Can't lose Chen. She's the only one who knows how to fix the coffee maker. He was making jokes. With 17 fractures and internal bleeding, this human was making jokes. Dr. Thalvin arrived, a krill orthopedic specialist whose expertise Vaylor respected immensely. He took one look at the holographic display and his mandibles spread wide in shock. This is impossible, he stated flatly. No species should be ambulatory with this degree of skeletal damage. The pain alone should have induced shock and unconsciousness. Yeah, it's pretty uncomfortable, Parker admitted. His face was growing paler, Vaylor noticed, and a fine tremor had started in his hands. The adrenaline was wearing off. Look, Docs, I don't mean to rush you, but I'm starting to feel kind of. His eyes rolled back and he started to slump. Vaylor caught him before he could fall, easing him back onto the bed. Finally, she muttered. Kursath, start IV fluids and prepare for emergency surgery. Dr. N, I need you to stabilize these fractures. We've got internal bleeding to address. The next 6 hours were some of the most intense of Vaylor's career. The internal bleeding was worse than the initial scans had shown, a ruptured spleen and lacerated liver. The fractures required 3 different surgical teams working in rotation. The spinal compression fractures alone should have resulted in paralysis, yet somehow the human's nervous system was intact. It was during the 4th hour of surgery that the human's crewmates arrived. There were 5 of them, 3 more humans, a Velkari and a Thracian. The Velkari female, who the others called Chen, had her arm in a sling but was otherwise uninjured. She was also crying, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with distressed blues and grays. Is he alive? She demanded the moment she saw Vaylor. Please tell me James is alive. He's in surgery, Vaylor assured her. Critical but stable. You must be Chen, the one he went back for. Chen's legs seemed to give out, and one of the other humans caught her. He went back, she whispered. The ship was coming apart, and he went back. I told him to leave me. I told him. Her voice broke. He said he couldn't lose you, Vaylor said gently. Something about a coffee maker. That got a watery laugh from the assembled crew. That's James, one of the humans said, a woman with captain's insignia on her torn uniform. Maya Reeves, captain of the Distant Star, or what's left of her. She looked at Vaylor with red-rimmed eyes. How bad is he? Vaylor pulled up the medical display. 17 fractures, internal bleeding, severe concussion, and multiple contusions. He was ambulatory when he arrived. The non-human crew members' reactions were immediate and shocked. The Thracian's scales rippled with disbelief. Ambulatory with spinal fractures. I don't understand, Chen said, looking at the scans. How is that even possible? Captain Reeves sighed. Because he's James, and James is too stubborn to know when he's supposed to fall down. But there was pride in her voice and fear and something that looked like grief even though her first officer was still alive. Vaylor studied the humans, these strange beings who could walk with broken bones and make jokes about coffee makers while dying. Is this normal for your species, this level of pain tolerance? Not normal, no, Reeves said. But humans can push through a lot when we have to. Survival instinct, adrenaline, sheer bloody-mindedness. We're built to keep going even when we probably shouldn't. She looked at the surgical suite where her first officer was being put back together. James more than most. He's former military, search and rescue. He's trained to ignore his own injuries when someone else needs help. Over the next several days, as James Parker slowly recovered, the story of what had happened spread through the medical center. The human who walked into the ER with 17 fractures became something of a legend. Medical students came to observe his recovery. Other physicians consulted on his case, fascinated by the resilience of human physiology. Vaylor found herself explaining the same concepts over and over. Yes, humans could remain conscious with injuries that would kill most species. Yes, their pain tolerance was exceptionally high when survival was at stake. Yes, they possessed something called an adrenaline response that allowed them to temporarily override their body's damage signals. But it was more than that, she realized. It was the why. Parker hadn't stayed conscious because humans were physiologically superior. They weren't. By most measures, humans were actually quite fragile compared to species with exoskeletons or redundant organs or regenerative capabilities. He'd stayed conscious because someone needed him to. When Parker finally woke up 3 days post-surgery, he was in a full-body cast with so many stabilization devices attached to him that he looked more machine than organic. Vaylor was checking his vital signs when his eyes opened. "Chen," was the first word out of his mouth. "Safe," Vaylor assured him immediately. "Minor injuries only. She's been here every day waiting for you to wake up." The relief on his face was profound. He closed his eyes again. "Good, that's good." "Mr. Parker," Vaylor said carefully, "I need to ask you something. When you walked into this emergency room with 17 fractures, a ruptured spleen, and a concussion, what were you thinking?" Parker was quiet for a moment. "I was thinking that if I stopped moving, if I let the pain take me before I knew my crew was safe, I'd never forgive myself. That's not really thinking, I guess. It's just what you do when people are counting on you. You nearly died." "Yeah, well." His lips quirked in a small smile. "Wouldn't be the first time, probably won't be the last, knowing my luck." Vaylor shook her head, her medical understanding warring with her inability to truly comprehend this level of self-sacrifice. "Your species is insane." "Maybe," Parker agreed, "but we're the good kind of insane, the kind that goes back for people." Later that evening, Vaylor stood in the observation room above the recovery ward, watching as Parker's crew visited him. Chen was holding his hand, the one that wasn't in a cast, and crying again. Captain Reeves was reading him reports from the salvage of their ship. The Thracian engineer was showing him holographic schematics of the new ship they were planning to buy. Dr. Thalvin joined her at the window. "Remarkable," the Krill physician said. "I've completed my analysis. By all medical standards, he should have been in shock within minutes of sustaining those injuries. The pain signals alone. But he wasn't, Vaylor interrupted. Because pain is just information and he decided other information was more important. That's not how physiology works. Apparently for humans, sometimes it is. Vaylor pulled up Parker's file on her data pad. I'm writing this up for the Interspecies Medical Journal. Other physicians need to understand what humans are capable of. Not just the physical resilience, but the psychological drive that enables it. What will you call it? Vaylor looked at the human in the recovery bed, surrounded by the crew he'd nearly died to save, and smiled. The Parker Protocol, Understanding Human Endurance Under Duress. Subtitle, Why Humans Don't Know When to Fall Down. Catchy, Thalvin said dryly, though I suspect the actual medical community will want something more technical. Let them, I'm keeping my title. Vaylor saved the file and turned away from the window. Besides, it's accurate. James Parker walked into my ER with injuries that should have killed him, stayed conscious long enough to ensure his crew's safety, made a joke about a coffee maker, and only then allowed himself to collapse. If that's not knowing when to fall down, I don't know what is. 3 weeks later, when Parker was finally cleared to leave, still in partial casts but mobile with assistance, the entire ER staff gathered to see him off. It wasn't standard protocol, but nothing about James Parker had been standard. Chen was there to help him, along with Captain Reeves and the rest of his crew. As they made their slow way toward the exit, Parker stopped by the nurse's station where Vaylor was reviewing charts. "Doc," he said, extending his good hand. "Thank you for putting me back together." Vaylor took his hand carefully, mindful of the healing bones. "Thank you, Mr. Parker, for teaching me something about your species. About courage and sacrifice and the kind of stubborn determination that defies medical logic. Just doing what needed doing," he said with that same self-deprecating shrug she'd seen before. "No," Vaylor corrected gently. "You did what most beings couldn't do. You stayed standing when you should have fallen. You went back when others would have fled. That's not just what needed doing. That's heroism." Parker looked uncomfortable with the praise, but Chen squeezed his arm. "She's right, James. You're a hero, our hero." As they left, Vaylor returned to her charts, but her mind was still on the human who'd walked in with 17 fractures. She'd been practicing medicine for 30 years, and she'd thought she understood the limits of biology, the thresholds of pain, the breaking points of different species. James Parker had taught her that sometimes the most important factor in survival wasn't physiology. It was the reason to keep going. And humans, she was learning, were very, very good at finding reasons. The ER returned to its normal rhythm, but the story of the human with 17 fractures became part of station lore. And whenever a patient, of any species, asked if they could really recover from seemingly impossible injuries, the medical staff had an answer. "Let me tell you about a human named James Parker."